And I'm pretty certain that our panelists here will share the same view, but also will be critical and provide their insights as to what will cause IMEC to be a success. So maybe I'll join the panelists now and get their insights as well. So Afaq, if I may come to you now, we have seen some other corridors as well. China's BRI is a case in point, and of course we were talking much earlier in the previous session about some other routes, etc. Now, in the world that we live in today, from a geoeconomic standpoint, do you see IMEC, and we're trying to make a case for it. Do you see this succeeding in the way and at the pace at scale that we wish it to, considering we have certain other examples as well? And from your standpoint, what would be the key underpinning for its success?
I'll just spend a couple of minutes on BRI. So just so that we can put things in perspective and context and then visualize IMEC through that. BRI is more than 10 years old initiative, around 150 countries part of it, backed and primarily funded by China. I think more than 1 trillion investments by 2024 have already been secured, and it has roadways, it has railways, it has seaports to which China then owns them up. We have ports in Pakistan and some ports in Europe as well. So that's the kind of scope that we are looking at when we are looking at BRI. IMEC, in comparison, has a very focused scope, which is as a corridor and which is looking at these limited countries at this point, and I'm sure there is a scope to enhance the scope of countries in IMEC. Having worked on connectivity and infrastructure, I see that scope of IMEC getting extended to other corridors as well. But when it comes to IMEC, right now it's just an idea, talking about an idea which doesn't exist right now. We're all positive about it. Sanjeev talked about, are we being too ambitious? It's good to be ambitious, but at the same time, we need to work on the implementation of that ambition. 2-3 things that we need to look at from an economic perspective. We need to firstly look at what is the economic gain that the countries are going to get out of this. The geopolitics part of it is one thing. But what is the gain that these countries are going to get? We're talking about 40% shorter voyage and about 30% cheaper. I have my own questions on the cost aspect, because we're looking at multimodal transportation. The more the modes, the costlier it becomes. And we're looking at sea, rail, and sea. In practical terms, it gets challenging for the corridor. When rail is first and last mile connectivity, it makes an efficient sense. But when rail is in the middle of 2 ocean voyages, it really needs super efficient systems. In practical terms, when a container comes and a vessel, I'm going very, very practical into it, because I think we need to understand these practical elements and then we can look at the larger picture of it. When a vessel with around 15,000-20,000 containers, that's what we're aiming for, Panama Max and big vessels going to the UAE port, 20,000 containers, they have to get onto a rail. And a rake would, 250 containers in one rake would go. So you need about 50 to 80 railway lines ready to move just one vessel cargo. Just imagine the level of infrastructure that is needed, and this is just one vessel. I'm just talking about one vessel. So that's the efficiency that we need. And you also have to keep in mind, at the end of the day, apart from other elements of IMEC, trade is one of the key elements of the business has to trade. It has to make business sense to a logistics player. It has to make business sense to an exporter, to an importer, to a shipping line, which are here to make business. So how do we manage that? How do we look at the cost efficiency? So at one point you have to enhance the efficiency, at the same time you have to make it cheaper also. So those are some of the, I would not call that as a roadblock. These are not roadblock. That's how a corridor evolves. It's a natural process. But these are certain things we need to keep in mind, because somewhere in the overall narrative, we're getting lost in BRI versus IMEC. Let's not get lost in that. BRI has its own scope. BRI, I mean, if you look at the last few years, China's trade with BRI partners is more than 2 trillions, and which has grown around 15 to 20% by 2022. So they're making progress. Let's not get caught in narrative. Let's make progress. The China-Europe rail has already moved almost more than $400 billion of goods, more than 1 million TEUs. So they have been there for 10 years, but let's not get stuck in that narrative of BRI versus IMEC. Let's look at these implementation aspects of the corridor. And also another aspect is the trade. You talked about ease of doing business. The rule that we have to follow, goods get loaded in Mundra, they have to be cleared till Europe, wherever the last port. It has to be port to port clear. You cannot keep clearing and documentation at each leg in the corridor. That's the level of technology, that's the level of regulations we are working with. The railway lines, there's a lot of upgradation, there's a lot of harmonization of railway systems needed in GCC still. So these are some of the practical implementation aspects that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about IMEC. And if we really have to, if this idea has to really see light of the day, I think implementation related aspects cannot be ignored.
So, Afaq, thank you so much. I think a dose of realism there, and clearly lots to do, as you clearly said, and we'll talk a little bit more about it.